A warm welcome to the Caribbean World Tourism Day 2022 Forum, being held under the theme Rethinking Tourism, Financing for Sustainable Tourism Development. Colleagues, this year, 5 regional organizations led by the Caribbean Tourism Organization have partnered to celebrate World Tourism Day 2022. These organizations include the CHTA, Compete Caribbean, the OECS, and the University of the West Indies. My name is Akola Cameron, and I am the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the UWI St. Augustine campus in Trinidad. And it is certainly my pleasure to be your chair for this morning's proceedings. I want to start by just sharing a few remarks before we get into the actual panel presentations. As you know, in the Caribbean, tourism has been used as a central tool for socioeconomic development, with many benefits that we have accrued over the decades. There is certainly no argument that we have seen significant job creation, infrastructural improvements, local and foreign investments, and certainly we have seen other trickle-down benefits to our wider society because of this industry that we dearly love, tourism. In the words of Jamaica's Minister of Tourism, Edmund Bartlett, tourism has been the fastest and easiest way to transfer wealth from the rich to the poor. And I quote, "As the plane lands, it brings wealth. As the cruise ship docks, similarly. There's no planting, no reaping, no germination, no packaging, no shipping. Immediately, the dollar goes straight into the pockets of an ordinary man." And this statement encapsulates what tourism has done for the Caribbean over the many years and why we take the time today to celebrate it. In the same way that we acknowledge the benefits, we also recognize the disadvantages of tourism when it is not efficiently and effectively developed and managed. The region, as you know, has had its fair share of drawbacks, ranging from economic leakages to natural habitat loss, reduction in biodiversity, land and marine-based pollution, loss of access by locals to sites and attractions, and the list goes on and on. These and other issues have led researchers to refer to tourism's dark side, which cannot be ignored in favor of the prominent socioeconomic benefits that tourism brings. But as we continue to transition into a post-pandemic period, we need to continue to seriously consider a more balanced approach to tourism development. One which seeks to, of course, minimize the disadvantages and maximize the benefits as far as possible. The COVID-19 pandemic in particular has turned the spotlight on sustainable tourism development. And consumer reports indicate a growing demand for sustainable travel options in all sectors. According to a recent report by Booking.com, 81% of travelers confirmed that sustainable travel is essential to them. 50% of them indicated that recent news about climate change has influenced them to make more sustainable travel choices. Moreover, 78% of global travelers intend to stay in a sustainable property at least once in the coming year. But 42% struggle to find appealing destinations that are less crowded, and 34% feel like it's not possible to find sustainable travel options in cities or other popular tourist destinations. But apart from consumer demand trends, the Caribbean, as we know, the most tourism-dependent region, is facing a conundrum with climate change and its impacts on our natural and human resources. Predictions point to a rise of temperatures by 1.4 to 3.2 degrees Celsius While sea levels should increase by 9 to 88 centimeters, we are already experiencing stronger and more frequent storms, even as we speak, beach erosion, and warmer temperatures. These impacts, of course, have implications throughout the tourism value chain, jeopardizing significant investments, product offerings, and more importantly, livelihoods. We saw firsthand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on tourism SMEs, the immense loss of employment, and the deterioration of quality of life. Based on these considerations, we need to continue to rethink our approach to tourism development as a region. And I say continue because before the COVID-19 pandemic, there were discussions on rethinking tourism in the Caribbean and pulling further away from the monoproduct of sun, sea, and sand. During the pandemic, this rethinking of tourism moved from mere discussions to concerted actions, resulting in new and revamped product offerings and marketing strategies. And it was really heartening to see a greater emphasis on virtual tourism, nomad tourism, and more low-impact, environmentally conscious travel. Many Caribbean destinations engaged in more concrete actions related to sustainable tourism development. We saw a focus on eco-labels, green investments, and green technology. Tourism recovery and resilience came to the forefront as many destinations fought to withstand the socioeconomic fallout of the pandemic. Some destinations led admirably in this regard, while others we saw some struggle along the way. But I echo the sentiments of the Secretary General of the UNWTO that we cannot go back to the old ways of working. We need new voices, new ideas, if we are to continue to transform this beloved sector. Post-COVID-19, we need to rethink, continue to be creative, and build the resilience of our tourism sectors for future shocks, which inevitably will come. For World Tourism Day celebrations 2021, I'm sure most of you can recall, we focused on redefining the 3 S's. The 3 S's identified were social inclusion, sustainability, and smart destinations and businesses. This year, we take a closer look at matters of sustainability in tourism, and particularly on this critical area of financing. Last Saturday, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, newly elected Prime Minister of Grenada, in addressing the United Nations General Assembly, reiterated his call to scale up climate finance for adaptation and remove the challenges that developing states face in accessing climate financing. Researchers reviewing barriers to sustainable tourism development in the Caribbean found that while several initiatives are being implemented by both the public and private sector, they lack management, cohesiveness, and in some cases, collaboration. However, more critically is the absence of financial resources and effective financial management for developing and implementing sustainable tourism products and services. Colleagues, today, the UNWTO asks that we reflect and rethink what we do and how we do it. And in keeping with this request, the collaborating organizations led by the CTO have put together this forum to reflect on the issue of financing for sustainable tourism development. If we are to minimize the disadvantages and to maximize the many benefits using a more balanced approach to tourism development, then plainly put, we need money to do that. Therefore, this forum will explore perspectives, best practices, and insights on alternative approaches to sustainable tourism development and financing. Colleagues, this morning we have 2 exciting panel discussions where you will learn more about shortly, and a total of 8 panelists will share their expert knowledge on this topic under consideration. One of the main objectives of last year's celebration was to promote a shift in perspective as it relates to the current and future development of Caribbean tourism through information sharing and exchange of knowledge, and it extends into this year's forum. We trust that you will obtain the critical information needed to drive this sustainable tourism agenda forward. But we also hope that you will let your voices be heard today and contribute your thoughts and ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, as we kick off this forum this morning, let me wish you Happy World Tourism Day 2022. At this time, having shared those few thoughts with you, permit me to welcome to our virtual podium none other than Mr. Neil Walters, our acting CEO and General Secretary and Secretary General for the Caribbean Tourism Organization. Mr. Walters, I now invite you to present the feature address.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Lewis. Thank you for those words. I want to say also, adding to your protocol list and introduction, the fact that the CTO, the chairman of the CTO, the Honorable Kenneth Bryan of the Cayman Islands had wished to be here, but because of, I'm sure most of you are aware that Hurricane Ian has had some impact on the Cayman Islands, or still having, given the rainfall that is still expected to occur. And therefore he is unable to be here, but I know he would wish to express his welcome to all of you who are joining us via this virtual audience. Before we go any further as well, I would like us to stop a minute and reflect on the fact that in the last couple of weeks, and including currently ongoing, the Northern Caribbean has been affected by major storms. And I think even we've noticed some loss of life. And I wish to, in this forum, indicate that we stand with our brothers and sisters in the Northern Caribbean and look and hope that the impacts, for instance, of this particular storm, Ian, that is currently affecting that area, would not lead to any further loss of life, and that, like the Caribbean has been known in the past, that area of the region rebuilds and restarts and shows the level of resilience that the Caribbean is well known for. So we cast our thoughts and prayers to those in the Northern Caribbean at this time. As Dr. Lewis would have indicated, we welcome all of you, our tourism professionals, members, and especially invited guests to what I look forward to as hoping and I expect will be a very interesting discussion for the next few hours, and will help us to advance some of our thoughts and ideas further. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to further tourism, as Dr. Lewis mentioned, this sector, this industry that we love. And I therefore look forward to some very fruitful discussions. I am honored to open this virtual conference to commemorate World Tourism Day 2022. World Tourism Day is celebrated every year and presents an opportunity to bring visibility to the importance and value of tourism, a leading global economic sector. It is also an opportunity to reflect on the various challenges impacting the sector, including regionally among our various destinations, and in that regard, assess tourism performance, devise plans, and discuss strategies for future tourism competitiveness, sustainability, and resilience. As you heard, last year we explored the future of Caribbean tourism, redefining the 3 S's, with the aspiration that the 3 S's distinguishing Caribbean tourism epitomizes a sector that is economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable, socially inclusive through ensuring equal access to opportunities and equitable benefits for all, and SMART, which requires digital transformation, climate and disaster resilience, and committed to excellence in service delivery, product quality, health, and safety. This year, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, has identified the theme for World Tourism Day as Rethinking Tourism, and the specific focus for this regional forum is the topic of financing for sustainable tourism development. Critically, one of the most important issues grappling the regional tourism sector is the financing of tourism. The tourism economy is evolving rapidly, marked by major global developments, including the war in Europe. And this comes after what has been, for several of our destinations, near 2-year hiatus in terms of travel as a result of the pandemic. The impact of that war I mentioned on oil prices, significant trends such as changing demographics, evolving demand, the influence of technology, climate change, natural hazards, and ongoing threats to health and safety. And all of these are significant threats to this sector which we love. These shifts present new opportunities and challenges for the region and the sector. There's therefore a need for innovative models and approaches to fund Caribbean tourism development, support policy implementation, and meet product development and marketing objectives. This calls for alternative fundraising and investment opportunities, including linked to the blue and green economy, such as climate finance, including benefiting from carbon markets and carbon credit schemes, and accessing grant funding for adaptation and resilience, and also implementing strategies to optimize and benefit from travelers' philanthropy programs through donations and volunteerism, and finally establishing tourism investment or enhancement funds. Today's discourse, the various speakers and presenters will share insights and expertise on these areas in greater depth. As the sector's recovery gets underway in the remaining vestiges of the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are being challenged to rethink the business of tourism. For public and private sector tourism practitioners globally, regionally, and at the national level, this means putting people and planet first and working together as governments, businesses, and host communities to build a shared vision for the future of the sector and our region, fulfilling the One Caribbean vision. Echoing the sentiments of the UNWTO Secretary General, and I quote, "Rethinking one of the world's major economic sectors will not be easy. Crisis has inspired and catalyzed creativity. The potential of tourism is enormous, and we have a shared responsibility to make sure it is fully realized. We need new voices as well as new ideas if we are to transform our sector and build a better tourism for all." I invite you all to join in this endeavor as we together seek to ventilate ideas, best practices, and strategize to define this sector that has served us so well. Once again, welcome to our virtual conference on the observance of World Tourism Day, and I look forward to what I hope will be fruitful and productive deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walters, for that opening feature address. And as he indicated, there needs to be a strategic focus as we go forward, as we attempt to put people and planet first, and how we can engage with the various financing schemes that we have available to do so. So thank you very much again to Mr. Walters. Colleagues, at this time, we have a UNWTO video presentation facilitated by Mr. Surab Pololikashvili, the Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. So please give us a minute to just cue that video presentation.
Sharon, please note we have no audio.
Okay, I apologize for that. Maybe we can move on to the next item and circle back to this video.
Okay, colleagues, we are just experiencing just a minor technical difficulty there, and we will come back to that video shortly. So allow us at this time to, I want to invite all our speakers and our panelists to turn their cameras on so that we can take an official virtual photo. So let me invite right, we are almost there. So Carol and Alejandro.
You need to turn mine on. I think it's off on your side.
Oh, on my side. Okay, I'll ask Sharon if she can do that. Mr. Franton, are we seeing you? Alejandro and...
Hi, I think it's
oh, you're
Alejandra.
not there. Sorry. Right.
Sorry, I have two connections because I was with the cell phone, but now I'm in my computer. No.
Okay, great, great. I see you. I see you. And okay. So all smiles. Sorry?
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Yes, so we are all set.
And
Yes,
we're still missing Brian Franton, does not have his video on.
Mr. Franton, are we going to see you?
Maybe he stepped away for a little bit.
Maybe. So we are taking our cue from Amanda.
yes.
Great.
Okay. Smile, everyone.
Oh, there's Brian.
Okay, one more. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, colleagues. And Sharon, are we ready to circle back to that video?
No, I'm sorry, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So colleagues, we will get to the video shortly. And at this time, let us shift gears as we move to that part in the agenda when we start the panel discussion. Okay. So as we focus now in the panel discussion, just a reminder that we are emphasizing the whole notion of financing for sustainable tourism development. As we've heard, investment and financing have an important role to play in supporting this whole transition that we talk about to low carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive tourism development, with the objective to provide an opportunity for meaningful discussions among public and private sector tourism industry stakeholders. We expect that this forum will explore these perspectives, best practices, and insights on alternative approaches to sustainable tourism development and financing. And features panel discussions. This is what we will do. We have 2 panel discussions, and each panel discussion will be followed by question and answers for audience engagement. So colleagues, allow me at this time to introduce the moderator for our first panel discussion, Mr. Wayne Elliott, and the topic for this panel discussion is demystifying climate financing. Now, Wayne Elliott is he is with the Innovation and Productivity in Caribbean Firms and Clusters at the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility. He is the coordinator of innovation and productivity. And let me also invite our other panelists to the floor, and I ask if all our panelists can now turn your cameras on as we welcome Mr. Elliott to steer us through this first plenary session. Mr. Elliott, let me hand the virtual podium over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all our specially invited guests. So I'm Wayne Elliott, Coordinator for Innovation and Productivity in Caribbean Firms and Clusters, Compete Caribbean. Essentially, we're a private sector development program aimed at delivering innovative and practical solutions that stimulate economic growth, increase productivity, and foster innovation and competitiveness while promoting economic inclusion. Today, my task is a very simple one. I will serve as your moderator for the next hour as we seek to demystify climate financing. Today, we'll pay a special interest and focus on carbon markets. We'll also spotlight and learn a bit more about the work of financing climate adaptation and resilience in the Virgin Islands. This session will explore opportunities for the regional tourism sector to support national tourism development goals by aligning to and accessing funds linked to climate adaptation, disaster mitigation and preparedness, carbon offsetting, and other channels. As such, it seeks to make the linkage between sustainable tourism development and the offerings of the carbon markets more pronounced, and to highlight the role that such offerings and markets could have in financing the future of Caribbean tourism. Today, our panel is made up of expert technicians who are well-versed in the space and who will provide us a guided tour into this vast and complex world. I am almost certain that by the end of this session, if you have not yet given the carbon market a second look, you will. Personally, I believe that this discussion is certainly a timely one, especially as we, the Caribbean nation states, are witnessing the first signs of what might be some traction as we continue to lobby the international community and advocate for the unlocking of greater levels of resources and financing to address the imminent and anticipated consequences of climate change. In fact, quite recently, you would have heard of the 2022 Bridgetown Agenda, which is a call for collective action targeting the reform of the global financial architecture to better assist countries such as ours to access reasonably termed and priced financing to sustainably ramp up investments in building climate resilience and sustainability. This is exciting. Now, it is my understanding that in 2021, the value of traded global markets for carbon dioxide, CO2, permits grew by over 160% to a record of US $851 billion. I also understand that the Caribbean Sea, one of our greatest shared assets, is over 1 million square miles big. And what I recently learned is that some researchers are now concluding that oceans and seas are sequestering much more carbon than previously thought. This has nothing to do with our vast forests throughout our member countries. As a believer in the Caribbean blue and green economies, this certainly piques my interest. And I am certain that you're keen to understand a bit more about the possibilities for the Caribbean in this space. Let's start off with an introduction to carbon markets, where our first panelist, Mr. Patrick Munianiza, Carbon Market Project Technical Advisor, Grenada, St. Lucia, and the wider Caribbean with the GIZ, will share an overview of the space and its possibilities. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section of the chat. Be sure to identify which panelist the question is targeted to, and we'll try to work the responses into the discussion. Patrick, I'm very sorry for destroying your name. The floor is yours, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wayne. Good morning, everyone, and happy World Tourism Day. Yes, my presentation will be based on the introduction of carbon markets. I want to set the scene, and the colleagues that are following me will dip they'll go a little bit deeper. Of course, every time we discuss the issue about sustainability and investment in sustainable solution, the question about finance, we always raise it, and it was stressed before my intervention that we have to look to alternative source of financing. And of course, carbon markets are this new kid on the block. This is a new source if we invest in technologies, in solutions that will reduce emissions, we can have some financing coming from these markets. So today I will be giving a little bit of an overview, a background on carbon markets, and the colleagues following me will explain a little bit more. Do we have my presentation already?
Yes, Patrick, we can see your presentation. Feel free to go.
Perfect. So next slide, please. So a little bit of an outline of my presentation. I will start giving an overview of our projects here in the Caribbean. And next, I'll talk a little bit about the carbon pricing and the rationale behind carbon pricing and carbon markets. And then I will talk about the key concepts of carbon market and how the carbon markets can result in carbon financing and this new source of financing. So about our project, the Global Carbon Market Project is around for 10 years now. We have 10 years of experience promoting carbon markets and carbon pricing instruments around the world. And just recently, starting last year, we have introduced our project in the Caribbean, and our official partners, as for now, is St. Lucia and Grenada. But at the same time, we work closely with the OECS Commission. The main objective of our project is basically to promote the use of carbon pricing instruments. And as I mentioned, we have been working in Tunisia, India, Uganda, and Chile, and of course now in Grenada, St. Lucia, and the Caribbean. Our approach, we develop and of course we advance market-based climate policy instruments, and of course we provide capacity building solutions for public sector and the public sector. We have always in other countries as well increasing the participation of our partners in international conferences and climate negotiations. And from last year, we have moved from one international carbon market scheme to another one with the new Paris Agreement. So there were a lot of debates in the past few years on the next regime of carbon markets, which entered in force last year in November with in Glasgow. So next slide, please. So when responding to climate change, we usually talk about two ways of doing this. One through mitigation, which is reducing the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the second one, which is adapting to the effects of climate change. And today we'll be focusing, of course, on the mitigation of reducing these greenhouse emissions and how you can generate extra revenues by investing in mitigation solutions. So we have a number of mitigation instruments. Next slide, please. And carbon pricing and carbon markets is just one of them. We have a lot of other initiatives, but today we're going to focus, of course, on carbon pricing and particularly on carbon pricing. So what is the rationale behind carbon pricing? Why do we have to put a price on the carbon? Next slide, please. We put a price on a carbon because climate change is a market failure. So the GHG emissions are a side effect of every economic activity. So this is the reason we need to, in fact, put a price on carbon. So the cost of emitting are included in economic activities. And therefore, we will reduce our GHG emissions. So the greenhouse gases are an externality. Next slide, please. And carbon markets and carbon pricing come in this picture to solve this failure. And what is in effect like carbon pricing? It places the price in every ton of carbon that is emitted in a basic principle that the polluter pays for the emissions. And it gives incentive to operators, of course, once we have a price on a carbon, they will reduce the emission by investing in more clean technologies. Next slide, please. So what instruments, what options do we have to place a price on carbon? We have a number of instruments already in place. We have the new Article 6 that I mentioned before. We have the voluntary carbon market. I will differentiate in the next slides. We have emission trading systems. We have one quite popular instrument, which is carbon taxes. This is being implemented like in a number of countries around the world. And of course, we have, we can remove the fossil fuel subsidies that we have. So that's as well is kind of a negative price, carbon price. And of course, you can have a blended, you can have a mix of these instruments. You can use ETS and with carbon taxes. Next slide, please. So I want, before we move forward, I want to focus on key concepts of carbon markets when we talk about carbon markets. So the first one, which is an offset. We have heard a lot about offsetting our emission, but how do we do it? And what is in effect like an offset is? So an offset is an emission reduction or removal from activities outside of the scope of a domestic market or a sector. What do we mean by this? In a country, in a jurisdiction, we can invest, or a company can invest, or a country can invest in another jurisdiction in technology to reduce or remove GHG emissions, and they can compensate by using this offset. And every offset is equal to 1 ton of carbon. or equivalent. And what are carbon credits, which we hear much often? So these are basically tradable certificates issued for actual emission reductions. It is very important here to highlight the characteristics of these carbon credits, which are very important. The first of all, these credits have to be additional, which means that every emission reduction have to be in addition to what would otherwise occur. They have to be permanent, or in another way, they're not reversible. They have to be real and verifiable. So we have to have sufficient data, and they have to be verified by independent auditor, and they have to be unique, meaning that one credit has to be associated with 1 ton of carbon, which means we don't want double counting. So these are the main characteristics of carbon credits. And what are carbon markets? Carbon markets are basically the platform where you exchange these carbon credits. And you can have 2 major groups of carbon markets. One which is the voluntary carbon market, where the participation into this market is not mandated through regulation. So here you have the primary goal here is to mitigate emissions, where the buyers voluntarily purchase carbon credits to offset the emissions. Of course, in the voluntary carbon market, you can have other goals, such as corporate social responsibility, brand building, and some about product and service differentiation. On the other side, you have mandatory carbon markets, which needs compliance the compliance here comes from a regulatory mandate. And then I'll move to the next slide, please. You have different market players, and of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about the scope. On the market players, you have suppliers, and here you have, for instance, CADA as a project developer who are joining us today. You have Atmosphere. You have standards, which are basically the protocols, the rules where these carbon credits will be emitted. You have golden standards, you have Vera, you have the UNFCCC, for instance, now like moving towards the Article 6. You have the intermediaries, and then you have end buyers. End buyers could be individuals who want to offset their carbon print. You have companies and countries. But what is most important here for the tourism sector? The scope of the carbon markets. Basically, you can have emission reductions coming from all sectors, including the tourism industry. And this can be natural-based solutions, or they can be from technology. And on the other side, you have removals. We have to distinguish between emission reductions and removals. And removals are engineered solution or carbon sinks. I think Mr. Wayne just mentioned about blue carbon at the beginning of the introduction of this session. So these are the market players and the scope of the carbon market. Next slide, please. This will be my last slide. So we have to look again at carbon markets as an alternative source of funding. By investing and reducing GHG emissions in our activity, for instance, in the tourism sector, there's a possibility that you can generate credits, and by selling these credits in carbon market, you can raise some finance. Of course, it's not as easy. I think the colleagues that will come follow, they will explain the complexity on issuing these credits. And thank you so much. I'm looking forward for the questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for whetting our appetite. Our next presenter will share with us a bit more on the opportunities in the carbon market for the tourism sector. Mr. Gary Klein, CEO, Carbon Asset Developer Associates, Grenada Limited. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Much appreciated. Share my screen. Oops. I'll start from the beginning here.
Yep, we can see it. Go right ahead.
Okay, good. Yes, I'm Gary Klein, CEO of Carbon Asset Developer Associates. And my presentation, I just finished it this morning because most of it had to do with a news release that just hit this morning. It's on super yachts. Now, I can't afford a super yacht, but just to give you a high level idea of what we're trying to do. Boats, vessels, they have requirements under the International Maritime Organization. Thresholds are like 2030 and 2050. And they use a very polluting form of fuel now. So what we're looking at for the Caribbean is a super yacht market where high wealth individuals can visit the islands on a continuous year-round basis and bring, you know, the sort of things that, you know, people that spend a lot of money bring. So let's see. So this is our initiative. I'm doing this with Capital C Design and Technology Limited, Capital C, and Lloyd's Register. That was the news release this morning. Has selected, I say CADA, was Carbon Asset Developer Associates, Grenada Limited, as their carbon partner to make things happen. So we'll start out with the Paris Agreement because we're looking at only compliance market credits right now. Article 6 was approved, was at COP26. It's tied to nationally determined contributions by each country to reduce its CO2 emissions in various quantities, sectors, and along various timelines. And every 5 years, each country, I think it's 192 countries plus the EU, are supposed to up their ambition as far as emission reductions are concerned. So using this as the baseline, we look at the climate crisis. As you know, cross-border coordination in the form of carbon trading was part of the NEDCs. Emission reductions pass from one country's greenhouse gas inventory to another. These are called internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. These are the offsets that Patrick was talking about in the previous presentation. ITMOs are a form of carbon credit. So, and they become ITMOs when they are used in different countries for reductions of another country's national greenhouse gas inventory. And that's what we specialize in. We have many years, 15 years of experience with CDM, UNFCCC in this marketplace. And in fact, we registered the largest fugitive emission utilization project under the CDM here in the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago in the South Trinidad fields with TOSL and Petrotrin. We monetize both avoidance and collection projects in upstream, midstream, downstream, emission, maritime, and cement manufacturing. We understand all of these business sectors, and we understand the technology and have the business processes in place to reduce emissions in each one. If you want to know what our favorites are, I kind of ranked them. Here's renewable energy, solar and wind. We're developing a solar project here in Grenada, where I'm at and where we're based presently. Oil and gas, because my family's from Grenada, but I'm from the US. I actually work a lot with oil and gas majors. And right now, LNG is hot for us. And we're working with a number of LNG farms and a number of the oil and gas majors, to reduce their emissions. Not with ITMOs as much as it is with other domestic incentives, which I'll touch on later. And now we're looking at the maritime as a part of the Lloyd's Register Joint Development Project with capital C. We have developed a class notation that will measure a vessel's reduced GHG. And again, that's important because to use alternative fuels is very expensive. It requires design changes or modifications. Conversions are very expensive in older vessels. So owners and workboat companies have a lot of problems. So we're starting with super yacht market, which we think will be a real winner for us. We like ammonia plants as well. Trinidad, maybe 15 years ago, was one of the first countries to capture CO2 from, I think it's 13 or 14 ammonia plants there at the time, and bring it to supercritical liquid form and transport it by pipeline to the South Trinidad oil fields for what we call EOR, enhanced oil recovery. Concrete is tough because cement, just the way it's manufactured, is very, very polluting. To get to clinker, there's not many alternates, but we've worked out some technologies that will help us. And presently, it pays good from an ITMO standpoint because every 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide that gets released into the air is equivalent to a metric ton of cement that's manufactured, which is really high. This is a super yacht. And this is the announcement I was referring to. This capital C design exceeds the IMO 2050 goals for emission. We will support the JVP with our distributed ledger technology, which we call blockchain, proprietary systems and control, like big data and IoT, as well as our MRV to measure the emission reductions from a baseline. So by meeting these IMO specifications for SOx and GHG reductions, our ITMOs will be consistent with Articles 6.1 and 6.2. Right now, Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, as a result of Glasgow, is operational. So you can trade now. Those trades are happening, and we're at the point of the spear on that. Article 6.1 is more or less cooperative endeavors. Cooperative endeavors means that two partnering countries, one with an excess of ITMOs can export them, to another. So the U.S. emissions are not leveling off; they're actually reducing from its baseline. So we think there's a lot of opportunity through some mechanism we set up with some of the SEC reporting companies that have an ESG responsibility to help bring these funds in. Again, what we're doing will attract investment, improve the business environment for investments in the sustainable yachts, improve the competitiveness of carbon positive yachts. When I say carbon positive yachts, it means there's no emissions, and assist the sustainable yacht building and yacht owners with carbon equity that offsets, the increased cost of going carbon positive. So we're looking at shipyards, and we're working with developers, which I'm not at liberty to name, but they are big developers capable of buying items and doing.
Hi, Gary. Can you have 1 minute? Can you wrap up, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
There we go. Job creation is key. We are the only IMO 2050 sustainable developer, and we have links with climate clubs, based in the US. We have the support of the International Finance Corporation, which is a sister organization of the World Bank. And this is the important part about the trading that will kick this off. In this case, I'm using Barbados. The Barbados government would have to commit to making a corresponding adjustment to avoid double counting if a country like the US decides to buy ITMOs in order to build the terminals and the infrastructure, or to provide the gap financing for the infrastructure needed for the sustainable yachts. This is how it will work with the climate finance coming up ahead, your debt, your traditional equity investment, your construction, and I am through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. So far, we've heard from Patrick, who gave us an introduction to the carbon markets and what carbon credits are. We've also heard about, how climate change in itself is a market failure. We've learned about the key concepts and definitions. We've learned a little bit about the scope. We've also learned about the work of CADA and some of the hot areas and the readily available market opportunities that they're seeking to exploit. If you're like me and you're project minded, I'm quite sure that you're very keen now to understand a bit more about how you can delve right in and begin to secure some of the available and existing climate financing to undertake some of the projects in your neck of the woods. Ms. Alejandra Blanco, Director of Environmental Services, Mexico 2, will now provide us with some of these insights. Alejandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I can start my video because it says the host stop it, but I'm gonna start talking, see what happens with the video. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here with you and share some of the experience we are developing in Mexico. We have also a Caribbean area, and we are working with the tourist sector. And I'm gonna share my screen, if you don't mind.
Yes, go right ahead.
Let me see, where is the, wait a second. think something happened with this. Let's see. There is. Now you can see my screen, right?
Yes, please. I can see your screen. If you can just full screen your PowerPoint, then we're good to go. Perfect. Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I think Patri and Gary already gave us a great scope of what is going on with the carbon markets and how it can be related to the tourist sector. I want to give a general view about how tourism is going to be affected by climate change. It has been recognized that there is a risk for the sector because tourism is really vulnerable to climate change, and it also contributes to the emissions of greenhouse gases. But most of the tourist areas, at least the ones that are in the coast, have a really they are very in danger, right? Because of the high level of the sea or the hurricanes, and there is always a risk in those areas. It's recognized that during the COP25 that we need to do something about it. And the tourist sector needs to start doing things to reduce the footprint, but also to accelerate the actions to make resilience, because if we don't do that, we are going to have a lot of loss of money. We are going to lose areas, hotels, and maybe the sector is going to be really affected, financial affected. There was a consensus growing in that COP that the tourist stakeholders need to future the resilience of tourists. The future of the resilience of tourists will depend on being able to take the low emissions path and cut the carbon emissions by 25% by 2030. So we don't have time. We are already in 2020, 2022. So we have at least 8 years. We need to start doing something. And I want to focus my presentation not in the concept of the carbon markets. We need to be practical, and we need to start moving and doing things and recognizing that the tourist sector has a lot to do and great opportunities to act. The first thing is we have to recognize the risk, because if we don't do that, we won't be able to take the actions that are needed. We also need to understand that most of the tourist areas depends on nature. So the tourist sectors need to improve the actions or start implementing solutions, nature-based solutions. And I make an example. If you go to a beach destination, and most of the Caribbean destinations, what makes the people that wants to go there, it's to see the ocean view, the forest, the biodiversity. What happened if we lost all of that in these areas? What will happen with the sector? The other thing we need to be conscious is that we need to start measuring our carbon footprint, or start doing or greenhouse gas inventories. We need to know how much we are affecting, what is our participation in this huge problem, and start doing things to solve it. And it means that we need to have commitments to reduce our emissions, and also what Patrick and Gary mentioned, start offsetting these emissions. Well, first taking action and reducing it, but we also are conscious that it's very difficult to get to a net zero emissions by 100%. So the rest, it's a good practice to start offsetting these emissions. In these ordinary ideas, I wanted to share these examples of concrete actions that the tourism sector can do. For example, as a mitigation actions, well, as also Gary mentioned in the last presentation, we can act making energy efficiency programs. We also, in the tourist sector, can start making waste management that also generates a lot of emissions. For example, another thing that they can do is to start using local suppliers to reduce the footprint of the supplements of the sector. In the adaptation actions, maybe we can, or the things that we promote to the sector to start doing is the restoration of ecosystems, and of course start investing in resilient infrastructure. But what we are trying to do, at least in the work we are doing in Mexico, is to start looking to the carbon market as a benefit or a co-benefit from the implementation of these integral programs. So you can start doing mitigation actions and adaptation actions, integrating in a program that it's integral program focused on local communities, and of course can make this the capitalization of the actions in credits that you can use in the voluntary carbon markets. For example, I was of the things that I put in this list, that is just like to mention some of them. No, it's not all of the things that can be done. Energy efficiency programs, waste management, and restoration of ecosystem can generate credits in a standard, the one that you like the most, and use them in the voluntary carbon market. And what we are promoting, I want to make to go back in the time, and like 10 years ago in Mexico, there were the first initiatives to incentivize the tourist sector to be low carbon sector. What they started doing was these initiatives of multi-stakeholders, and they wanted to transform Quintana Roo in a model of low carbon tourism. What they did in that time was just inventories, measuring the footprint. They were talking about the registration of a NAMA, and the hotels start reporting and the actions that they were doing about mitigation and adaptation actions. But they were never thinking about this in integral way. Now, what we are doing is to start thinking in tourists like a developer of many I'm sorry, my English is not the best, but I'm gonna do my best effort. We are trying to make these programs integral programs that consider many of the areas of and the actions that can impact in the mitigation and also in the adaptation, and use the market as a mechanism of finance. And what we are proposing, we're working this, I'm not allowed already to say with the hotel we are working with, but I'm gonna share the main or the idea of the project because we want to share this, because it's not just reduce the emissions and generate the credits. That's the easy way of doing it, but we need to start thinking about the tourism as a part of the development of a region. And for this, we are working with this hotel and an NGO and we are generating a project that to start the productive restoration and ecosystem conservation of the natural capital that is beside this hotel area. So we are improving the livelihoods, starting programs of capacity building, equipment, new ways of produce agriculture, and also cattle and honey and all this stuff. And the implementation of these actions will reduce the impact of the traditional actions in the ecosystem.
Hey,
So,
Alejandra,
yeah.
you have 1 minute. Can I ask you to wrap up, please? Thank
Say it
you.
quickly. So what we are trying to do is that forests grow, so it will capture carbon, and this carbon will be translated into credits in the voluntary market, and can be used for compensation for the hotel or for another interested company. And this money is going to be used in a trust that it's going to be used and managed by this NGO to still financing the productive restoration and ecosystem conservation of the area. And with these activities, also we are linking the hotel with these communities and establishing a local supply model with the production on sustainable production that it's going to be done with the hotel. So we are making this all together and make it more efficient. We are generating employment, also the restoration, the conservation, the resilience of the ecosystem, guaranteeing the environmental services that are the things that the sector depends on. So that's the idea. I made myself clear and you understand the message. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Alejandra. We totally understand the message, and we thank you very much for presenting us with some concrete actions and possibly some areas for direct entry into the voluntary carbon market. Thank you. Our last presenter hails from the Virgin Islands. Miss Angela Burnett Penn is the Climate Change Officer at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor. She's going to be presenting on innovative financing for adaptation and resilience. And she's going to share a bit with us on what the Virgin Islands is doing as it relates to the Climate Change Trust Fund. Angela, are you there? The floor is yours.
Thank you. A pleasant good morning to everyone, and happy World Tourism Day. I'm just going to share my presentation with you. You'll please let me know when you're able to see my screen in presentation mode.
Yes, so I can see your screen. Yes, and it's in presentation mode. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. So it's my pleasure to be here with everyone today celebrating and to share a bit about the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund as a model for smart governance and sustainable finance in the context of climate change adaptation and mitigation in SIDS in particular. I first want to give you a quick overview of the timeline around the development of the climate change architecture in the British Virgin Islands that has led us to the establishment of the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund. It's a fairly short story dating only to 2007, which is when climate change was officially established as a portfolio within the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, followed shortly by the establishment of a climate change officer post to support development of the portfolio and rollout of our climate change program. And I've been fortunate enough to hold that post from the inception. And later that year, we were able to have Cabinet establish a standing cross-sectoral climate change committee, which is really the heartbeat of our institutional framework around addressing climate change. So by the end of 2008, we had our institutional piece of the architecture in place. And the impetus for that really was that the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center for the first time was able to secure funding for the British Virgin Islands and the other overseas territories of the UK to address climate change for the first time and try to catch up with the great work that had been happening all around the Caribbean for many years before that. So coming out of that committee, we did a lot of public education, we did a lot of assessments and a whole lot of public consultation that allowed us in May 2012 to have Cabinet approve with much support our climate change adaptation policy. So that gave us the policy piece of our architecture. And then most recently in March of 2015, we had the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund legally established, which gave us that final sustainable financing piece of the climate change architecture. So the Climate Change Trust Fund in particular, I just want to speak a bit about the timeline for that. So I think my slides have gotten a bit out of order somehow, so I'll juggle a bit. But in terms of the development of the trust fund, the idea was really born at COP15 in 2009, which was the first time that BVI and the other OTs were actually able to attend COP. And it became very clear to us that the international scene as it relates to climate finance was not changing very quickly in our favor. And essentially, under the convention, as overseas territories of the United Kingdom, it means that BVI and the other OTs fall on the giving side of the equation, and we're not able to access the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, or any other multilateral fund for that matter that have been set up, that has been set up to provide funding for adaptation or mitigation. So we quickly realized we had to find a creative way around this hurdle in order to allow us to attract the sort of large scale financing that we needed from external sources in order to address our adaptation and mitigation needs. So the idea of the trust fund was born as a creative mechanism to serve that function. It was called for in the climate change policy that was approved in 2012, but well before that, we had started the work of building this institution, starting with a term sheet that was developed by a cross-sectoral technical working group, which I chaired, and we continue to receive support from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, so that by the end of 2012, we had a cabinet-approved term sheet which served as the basis for the development of the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund Act, which established the fund, and that act was passed in March of 2015. We then set out on a very extensive public education and sensitization campaign, because this was really a first of its kind, not just in BVI, but in the region. And in particular, the governance structure of the fund, at the highest level, you have a board of trustees, and those persons have to be appointed through an open, transparent public application and nomination process. So we did a lot of work around sensitization there, ensuring that we were able to pool a set of candidates who met the requirements as set out under the Act. So in July of 2017, we achieved the important milestone of having the first board of trustees appointed. And I'm pleased to say we had a very, very capable group, very enthusiastic group coming together, and they were able to achieve significant milestones in a short period. In May of 2018, shortly after we had been devastated by Category 5 hurricanes Irma and Maria, we were able to see the operational manual approved, and that's really the manual that guides all operations of the trust fund. And although we're not currently eligible to access the GCF, that was developed to a standard that would allow the trust fund to be GCF accredited in the future. And importantly, in December of 2018, we were able to achieve the milestone of having Cabinet approve a source of seed funding to facilitate the operationalization of the trust fund. And that had really been one of the chief hurdles to date, the establishment of seed funding to get the institution built and going. So I'll have to juggle back up quickly. So legally, the trust fund is established as a body corporate with perpetual succession and a common seal. And there are three objectives set out under the Trust Fund Act. Firstly, it is to serve as a link between domestic and international climate finance and national climate investment strategies. Secondly, it serves as a catalyst to attract investment. So it really provides a safe vehicle, trusted vehicle where persons, entities know that if they put their funds there for climate change adaptation and mitigation, whether projects or programs, they will be so used. And thirdly, it serves as a national implementing entity for the Virgin Islands, which essentially means that it is the official place where all funds related to climate change adaptation and mitigation, all external funds, should be housed for distribution. And where those funds come from, there's an endless set of options. The Act sets them out, as you see on the screen, everything from gifts and donations to levies, fees, proceeds from services that the trust fund itself might provide, and any other source of revenue deemed appropriate by the board. And this really opens up the opportunity for not just bilateral funds, but for the trust fund to manage funds coming from a range of creative market-based mechanisms, including some of the mechanisms we've already heard about today. And importantly, I think the Climate Change Trust Fund supports the full range of actions that are necessary to adapt to climate change and to mitigate. So that can be any action called for under the climate change policy, any innovative climate change initiatives not necessarily addressed in the policy, capacity building, education, research, disaster risk reduction, and so on. And directly in line with that is the fact that it supports actions across a wide range of sectors. In fact, all 12 sectors covered under our climate change policy. And I highlight here the fact that the tourism sector is included within that, of course, as an extremely vulnerable sector and a sector where we prioritize the need for adaptation. Just quickly, I want you to appreciate that the Climate Change Trust Fund does not exist in isolation. It forms part of this wider architecture that I explained earlier. And there's a tight linkage between the Climate Change Committee, the policy and the trust fund, where the climate change committee is responsible for updating and implementing the policy. The policy then guides the funding priorities of the trust fund, and the trust fund, of course, supports implementation of the policy through providing the sustainable financing mechanism. The Climate Change Trust Fund is an independent entity, and that's core to its underlying principles, but there is a level of involvement and oversight from government. So from a policy perspective, for instance, Cabinet would approve the climate change policy, and the Climate Change Trust Fund Act includes a number of mechanisms for high-level oversight by the Minister of Natural Resources and Labor and the Minister of Finance. In terms of its internal structure, at the highest level, we have a board of trustees, which actually is a majority of private and civil society representatives, with 2 representatives from government, and that's supported in its day-to-day operations by a secretariat headed by a CEO. And then we have a review committee that serves the function of providing technical review for applications for funding. Just quickly, there are really 5 core principles that underpin the Climate Change Trust Fund. I spoke already about independence, which is at its core. Also a high level of transparency, ensuring that there is fair and equitable access to the fund, and that the funds are really a blended source of finance, and those resources are responsibly managed. So in terms of fair and equitable access, I think this is one of the most beautiful things about the trust fund. It appreciates the fact that the work of climate change adaptation and mitigation cannot be the work of government alone. And therefore it supports access by NGOs, private sector, including entities within the tourism sector, registered associations, academia, and it actually places a cap on the amount that government can access on an annual basis to help to ensure that there's that fair and equitable access by all of the relevant players. And in terms of responsible resource management, there are a number of mechanisms set out in the Act, everything from ensuring that the trust is operating on an approved business plan to ensuring there's an annual budget to guide operations quarterly, as well as annual reporting, social and environmental, number of other mechanisms. And I think one of the important lessons learned to date is really the importance of these principles in ensuring that the Climate Change Trust Fund can be seen as a trusted, secure entity, and the importance of having these principles deeply embedded within the Act to ensure that they're safeguarded over time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. There's more information about the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund at the web link provided, and you can reach out to me at the email address listed on the slide, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela, for sharing about the trust fund. It seems that, the hurdles related to access and where you can actually find your financing, it really hasn't stopped you, and I wish you all the best in securing the finance that you really need to push your efforts forward. So we've gotten to the point where we had the last panelist, and we're going to move swiftly into the question and answer. So in the Zoom, what you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A. You're able to submit your questions there. Feel free to submit your questions. I'll try to paraphrase them, and I'll try to share them with the panelists. All right, so the first question, it could be an open question, really. It has to do with, let me just find that. We spoke about the data and being able to really account for your carbon credits and how to really move that forward. And I'm wondering, how, with this in mind, like how can Caribbean states build the blocks or the foundations that are really needed to really participate within the carbon market? Patrick, is this a question you'd be able to field for us?
Yes, sure. Of course, yes, the MRV system, which is basically the data to support the carbon credits, it's quite essential. And I know there are a number of initiatives supporting MRV systems in the Caribbean. For instance, there is the MRV hub in the Caribbean that is supporting countries to put in place robust MRV systems. And of course, in the future, coming from UNFCCC as well, there will be support in that sense. And you mentioned this is a crucial element of carbon. You need quality data for you to have a good carbon credit. You need to have good quality data, and the MRV systems are essential. So you have these platforms that came on the top of my mind, MRV Hub, and some support from UNFCCC. And at some extent as well, the GCM GIZ as organization, we can support like the MRV systems.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Is this a government thing, or is there a rule for the average Joe in this, in the collection of data? You know, does it help that I collect information on my own carbon footprint? Does that factor in at all? How can the average Joe get involved?
Yeah, so you need like national MRV systems where like the government plays a big role. But of course, if you want to set up a carbon project to your business, you will need to invest in your own MRV systems. So that's why you have, when I was mentioning about the players, different players in the market, you have players that can support you establishing those MRV systems. So you have both components. And as Gary stressed out, moving towards the new international architecture with Article 6, for instance, credits or ITMOs that will be generated under those Article 6, they will need, because we are talking about international transaction of those credits, you will need a lot of investment from the government in MRV systems.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. I'm gonna ask one more question and then we'll turn to the questions from the Q&A. So Alejandra, you spoke of a low carbon tourism future. Is there a specific role here for community-based tourism type projects?
Hello, I still can open my video. It's okay. I think in our perspective, I think that to achieve this goal of have this low carbon tourism, it should be done with the communities. If not, it won't be able. Because it's not just what you can do inside of your building or your complex. You can do a lot of things and reduce your footprint or your emissions, and you can use the standard you like, but the community related to these areas live in these nature areas, work in this tourist complex. So you need to start working with these communities and with these people to really achieve the goals. If you don't have this support, and you will be fighting again alone in this huge battle, and maybe you can lost the battle, right? That's why we are developing these integral programs. We understand that if you can reduce your footprint, you need to start looking for the local suppliers, for example. If you need to restore the forest to continue with the ecosystem services that it brings to your tourist area, like water, like the climate and all this. The people lives in those areas, so you need to work with them. You need to understand how they live, how they use these areas, and start working with them and improve their livelihoods so they can work with you to make these areas more resilient to climate change?
Okay, no problem. So thank you very much. It's an open question here. With so much of our GHG emissions related to associated services of the sector, things like transport, construction, agriculture, how could tourism stakeholders leverage green practices and policies to market a more sustainable approach to the industry? You know, is there a more sustainable approach? What can we do, you know, as existing stakeholders in this space? How can we do more?
I'll chime in quickly on this one.
Sure.
So I think, first of all, it starts with a level of education and awareness. I think the information, for example, that was shared at the outset of this session, which really highlights the shift that we're seeing within the tourism market globally, that people are demanding greener experiences. People want a sustainable travel experience. I don't think that that information is filtering down to the taxi driver that is taking people off of the cruise ship, for example, and taking them to their beach excursion. That information is not getting to the people that are making the day-to-day decisions on the ground that really boil up to be our tourism product at the end of the day. So I think first and foremost, it's about getting the information to the right players for them to appreciate that there is a strong value proposition in them changing their modus operandi, in them investing in greener technologies and just more sustainable ways of producing the food that supplies the tourism sector, the transportation that supports it, and all of the other support services. But it definitely starts with information. Right now, in the absence of that, there is no push, there is no drive, there is no reason for persons to make the sort of changes that are necessary.
Thank you, Angela. And I think we're just about coming up on our time that was allocated. And so I'll give each panelist a quick 30 seconds for your final thoughts. Maybe we go in the order which you presented. Patrick?
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you for this interesting panel. Yes, I think it's very important at this point to look at carbon markets closer as an additional source of financing. I'm aware that it's still a new species in the whole financing system, and it's a very complex one, but I think it cannot be overlooked somehow. So it's very important for the whole industry to look at carbon markets and see where, particularly like those initiatives that reduce emission, how they can incorporate like in the carbon markets. As you mentioned before, some emissions are really difficult to reduce, particularly those coming from indirect, they're not directly linked to your operations, but somehow there are solutions like in the market now where you can include by estimation the emission as coming from outside of your operation.
Thank you. Gary?
Yeah. Carbon markets are just a baseline. As I was trying to get through my presentation, there's so many moving pieces. It's such a complicated, big issue. You can't really deliver it in 8 minutes. You probably couldn't deliver it in a whole day. You don't got to consider more than the offsets between two countries. You got to look at domestic incentives in each country, which sector, the timelines, the commitments by each country. It's a real thought process. You have to mind map through these things. And if the Caribbean is ever going to take advantage of carbon market in Article 6, it's got to do a deep dive into the opportunity in each one of the 192 countries' issues when it comes to its NDC, as well as the EU and the jurisdictions that's the compliance jurisdictions that's wants to keep climate finance out, And at the same time, you got to look at the climate clubs that's being generated and the fact that they're putting up climate tariffs or carbon tariffs, so the ability to trade is going to get more expensive if you don't do something, quick, fast, and in a hurry. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. Gary, I'm going to break protocol 1 minute. I'm going to ask you a very targeted question here. Are we at the stage where the average Jane, the average Joe can really get in and try to monetize the climate financing space in the Caribbean?
No way. No way. You have to work as a group, as a team. It has to be in collaboration. Just like the news release this morning, I'm working with Shell on another project. It's got to be a team effort, and you got to know what your end game is. You have to be focused. You have to prepare your brain for winning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. Alejandra, final comments?
Yes, thank you. I think my comment will be that we don't have much time. We need to take action.
Yeah.
And we need to make this more, how do you say, operable. We need to make this work and involve all the stakeholders. As Gary said, we need to work together as a team. And I think we need to use the carbon market as a tool, not as a final, as the focus. We need to use it as a tool to improve our actions and to have enough money to develop the actions. And we have a lot of options into the mandatory or even in, but I think most in the voluntary carbon markets.
Okay.
And we need to start using it and take this opportunity of financial.
Thank you, Alejandra. Angela, final comments.
Yes, but let me first just thank the Caribbean Tourism Organization for this opportunity and for putting on this important forum. I just would end by saying that I think in the Caribbean, we're really sitting on a huge opportunity to leverage our tourism sector to actually help us adapt to climate change and to mitigate, to transform our energy economies. I mentioned the fact that we've been able to secure seed funding tourism sector to do that. So in BVI, we have a $10 environment and tourism levy that's levered on every tourist that visits, and 40% of that is now going to the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund. And while we are small islands with small populations, I always think of the Caribbean islands as having this huge extended population that comprises not just of our diaspora, but also of our tourists. Because I think one of the unique features of Caribbean tourism is that we have a high repeat rate. I think in BVI, the figures are something like 80% repeat tourists, which tells me that our tourists are actually highly invested in our region and would be willing to invest in preserving the Caribbean as their backyards, as their vacation spots. So I think there's a lot more that we can do around how we engage our tourists, not just monetarily, but how we engage our extended tourist population in ensuring that our islands have a sustainable future in the face of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you, all panelists. On behalf of all my panelists, myself, I wish to thank all our viewers and the organizers for allowing us the space to present to you this morning. I promise that we would have whet your appetite and you would have been taking a second look. Now is your opportunity to go research it, go in depth, and try to understand what role you could potentially play. Thank you very much for your time. We hope that you enjoyed this session. Dr. Cameron, over to you.
Wayne, I want to thank you for expertly leading us through this first panel discussion on demystifying climate financing. Colleagues, as we have heard, our appetite is now wet, as you say, for understanding the carbon markets. And thanks to Patrick and Gary for certainly increasing our awareness of carbon markets. and of course, Alejandro and Angela for giving us the practical side, and looking forward to hearing the outcome of that project in Mexico, Alejandro. And of course, Angela, we are hoping that we will see similar initiatives emerging in other destinations around the region. So colleagues, thank you very much for this first session. And as indicated earlier, we are now ready to show that video by the Secretary General for the UNWTO. And so we will go directly to that. Amanda? Amanda, we're seeing you, right? Uh-huh.
Akola, I had put the link to the video in the chat. Maybe people can click on it and view at on their own time, and we can move forward because there's still a sound issue.
Right, yes, I realize we're still getting that audio challenge.
Mhm.
So colleagues, we will do that. The link is in the chat. And
I'll post it again so people have easy access to it.
great. And you can look at that when we are through here. So we are moving right into the second panel discussion. And this session is on innovative tourism financing and investment solutions. We are pleased to have with us Mrs. Maria Fowell, who is the Senior Technical Specialist for Tourism at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission. And Ms. Fowell will lead us through this session where we have 4 panelists who will share their experience with us. So Ms. Fowell, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to wish everyone a very happy World Tourism Day. As the Chair indicated, I am Maria Fowell. I'm the Senior Technical Specialist for Tourism at the OECS Commission. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for the second panel on innovative tourism financing and investment solutions. So in the context of the theme for World Tourism Day, Rethinking Tourism, we will focus on how we can rethink the financing of tourism. The session will explore innovative tourism financing and investment solutions, featuring presentations on travel, philanthropy, opportunities linked to virtual reality and the digital economy. We will look at innovative public and private sector resource mobilization approaches in the funding of tourism development and supporting policy implementation and to be able to meet product development and marketing objectives. Emphasis will also be placed on initiatives that can capitalize on the goodwill of visitors. I believe in our last panel, that point was raised to the region and that are strategically aligned to national and community tourism development priorities. So I would now like to introduce you to the panel. We have 4 diverse panelists this morning from across the Caribbean region. Mrs. Carol Rose Brown from Jamaica, Mrs. Madeline Fielden, from Grenada, Mr. Brian Fonting from Trinidad and Tobago, and Mrs. Haley Jo Carr, who is going to speak to a project in the Bahamas. So first order of business would be Mrs. Carol Rose Brown. Mrs. Carol Rose Brown is the director of the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation, and she's going to give us a background and some of the achievements of the Jamaica Tourism Enhancement Fund. Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Maria. I hope everyone is seeing my screen.
Yes, Carol, can you just put it into slide mode?
Yes, I'm doing it now. Okay.
Excellent.
All right, so I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you all so much, and happy World Tourism Day. We want to talk about the Tourism Enhancement Fund, what we do in Jamaica, and how we operate. So the Tourism Enhancement Fund was, the Tourism Enhancement Fund Act was passed in December of 2004. It allows for the collection of a fee from incoming visitors to Jamaica, both from airports and cruise ports. The fee was to be used for promoting the growth and development of the sector based on the tourism plan that the industry would have collaborated to develop. In 2017, a major change to how these funds were managed took place. The funds, though they are still collected by IATA and funneled to the Tourism Enhancement Fund, are now directed to the consolidated funds. So they are part of government funds, and the tourism sector has, let us say, we have good first dibs on what we require. The mission statement for the Tourism Enhancement Fund is to facilitate the implementation of the Tourism Master Plan through prompt collection of fees, prudent management of funds, and deployment of resources in the sustainable development towards strengthening Jamaica's tourism industry. By that, we mean human capital development, new markets, new partnerships, new products, and new investments. And as we process through how the Tourism Enhancement Fund operates, I hope you understand all of these things. The leaders in our ministries, of course, our minister, the best tourism minister on the planet, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, our permanent secretary, Ms. Jennifer Griffith, our illustrious chairman, Dr. the Honorable Godfrey Dyer, and of course, our executive director, Dr. Kerry Wallace. That represents our leadership team. And our administrative team, again, Dr. Wallace, Francine James Prince, our Director of Finance, Mr. Rampere, the Director of Projects, Mrs. Riley, the Director of Linkages Network, myself, the Director of the JCTI and the Craft Development Institute, Giselle Jones, who is the Manager of Risk and Research, Mr. Chin, who is Manager for Procurement, and Mrs. Oldham, who is the Manager of Human Resources and Administration. What do we do? In 2020, the ministry rolled out the Blue Ocean Strategy. This was the idea that our goal was to develop new projects for which there was no competition. We were not interested in focusing our energy on those activities where there were 5 other players in the market. We really wanted to go toward developing those projects that were unique to Jamaica, that spoke to visitors about a unique Jamaican experience. And to that extent, we adopted the Blue Ocean Strategy, and that then underpins all of what we do. We also made a decision that we wanted, though we understood we had to do all infrastructure work and other kinds of development work, we also wanted to address what we call transformational projects. That is to say, projects that would impact tourism in a unique way and bring new players, new ideas into the market. And the idea was to ensure that these things combined to ensure that Jamaicans understood the importance of tourism, understood how it affected their lives, and understood how they could participate. We wanted people to understand that tourism was more than about serving drinks and guest room cleaning, that it had to do with this amazing value chain to which they could connect. Our project cycle is very long. Our average project cycle is between 3 to 4 years. We have, of course, a concept. Then we prepare an appraisal for our board. Our board then must approve what we next do for us to go forward. At which point we go to design. We get feedback from our partners, whether those are the community or institutional partners. These designs and feedback and business plan need to be presented to our Ministry of Finance, specifically to the PIAB, which is the Project Investment Appraisal Board, branch rather, of the Ministry of Finance. And then after approval, that could take 6 months or so, we then are at the construction phase. We go to procurement, we go to build, and then of course, the project is handed over to our partners or they begin their work. So I want to speak a little bit about what each department does. The finance department, of course, their job is to collect the fees and to monitor the airlines and cruise ships to ensure that the correct fees are paid. Then, of course, they transmit these funds to the consolidated fund. But on the imaginative side, the Tourism Enhancement Fund lends money to the Exim Bank, our export development bank. And we also lend money to Jamaica National Small Business Organization. And again, these funds are to be lent at very concessional rates to small and micro tourism enterprises. And the goal is here to improve the efficiency, to improve the quality of product, to improve the salaries that are paid, to improve the product presentation, packaging, etc., so that our products stand out. And of course, the finance department of the Tourism Enhancement Fund is responsible for ensuring that our financial reports, our payments are completed in a timely manner to ensure that we're not in breach of any regulations. The projects department, their job is to develop the construction side of projects. They do a number of infrastructure development work in communities. They work with partners across the country, whether it's in other government agencies or ministries to develop projects, to work together to develop projects for the benefit of the communities, especially across Jamaica or especially in the tourism and resort towns. An example of that is the recently opened Harmony Beach Park in Montego Bay. And the soon to be open, we hope in this financial year, the first artisan village in Jamaica, which is going to be in Falmouth. The linkages network is again one of the unique things that TEF does. The goal here is to identify small and micro enterprises and bring them into the tourism value chain. One of their major events is what they call Christmas in July. Christmas in July is an opportunity for small and micro businesses to present their products to the private sector, including the tourism sector, for those persons who are looking to buy gifts for December. There's also their signature programs is speed networking, where they introduce these producers to purchasing managers at the various hotels. And of course, they manage 5 networks. The minister speaks often about passion points, food, entertainment, sports, shopping, that kind of thing, meetings, that kind of thing. And the linkages networks manages those 5 areas. They are guided by a council and made up of the private sector in the tourism sector, and their work is just phenomenal. One of their major projects this past year has been the development of farmers in the Blue Mountains who now grow strawberries for the sector. And the story is they don't have hands to sell the strawberries. This is really quite extraordinary. Who knew that we could grow strawberries in the Blue Mountains? My division, the Center for Tourism Innovation, our job is to facilitate human capital development. Our job is to ensure that the workers in the sector are certified to international standards. We also have a responsibility for developing certification programs for college graduates who are studying hospitality, tourism, and culinary arts. We also have a program in high school where we deliver tourism-related content. We certify tutors to deliver these programs. And of course, I should tell you that in our we are 4 years old. We have certified over 10,000 persons, and we are moving forward with that. We also have a summer internship program. And for the CDI side, we are developing a series of, a number of artisans and unique Jamaican experiences, which people, when they come to the artisan village at Falmouth, will experience.
Carol, I'm going to have to ask you to speed up a little bit. You have 1 more minute, very interesting, but 1 more minute to go.
Got it. Risk and research, they are interested in our business continuity plan that was critical in the face of 2020 of the coronavirus. They have developed an amazing enterprise risk management framework. And of course, on Friday of this week, they'll be introducing the country to an incubator, which is intending to find the next big thing, the next big idea in tourism. We believe that there are risks and rewards to this. Of course, there are risks. So there's, right now, there's the issue of staffing in our sector. But the rewards are that we are first to market. And the citizens are now beginning to understand the general improvements to their lives and the importance of tourism. And finally, I want to say a little bit about our near term and long term. We are struggling with skill shortages right now, and we are trying to fix that problem. We need to manage our risk. Longer term, we need to deliver these transformational projects, more and more of them. And we need to facilitate innovation in technology and digital space, all of that. And finally, we want to ensure that Jamaicans understand how tourism affects their lives, because this is our lifeblood. Thank you, Maria, we're done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. I'm sure that everyone will agree that the Jamaica Enhancement Fund has made an excellent contribution to Jamaica. It is, great that the fund, hearing you, I'm listening to you, recognizing how much it supports, in particular, small businesses, and I think that that's excellent. The focus on transformational projects, excellent structure. We applaud their success. And Carol, thank you for your contribution this morning.
Thank you so much.
Moving along, we move from the public sector to the private sector. Our second speaker is Mrs. Magdalena Fielden, and she's the owner of True Blue Bay Resort in Grenada. And she's going to provide an insight into corporate social responsibility from a hotelier's perspective. So Magdalena, over to you.
Thank you very much. If you have my presentation, please. So our hotel, like you mentioned, is in Granada. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us. It's wonderful to be here, an honor, and happy World Tourism Day. Next, please. So we are in Granada, True Blue Bay Resort. We bought the resort in 1998, so we've been 24 years here. Before that, my husband Ross Fielding and I were working in the Caribbean and different islands, and mainly in a yacht charter company, but they start buying hotels and restaurants. So that's how we get involved in the hospitality business. When the opportunity came to buy True Blue Inn at the time, there was a little bankrupt hotel with 7 rooms. We were so excited, as we always love Granada. And at the time we had 2 little girls that we thought it'd be the perfect place for them to grow up. So we moved in and we bought the hotel. And then before that, we realized that Granada really is a boutique island with boutique tourism. We don't have mass tourism, and we cannot just make the hotel successful relying on tourism. So we had to somehow involve the community. And then when we started the adventure. So next, please. At the moment, the hotel has grown in 24 years to a 70-room hotel. We've run our family, my 2 daughters, my husband and I, and our granddaughter too, of course. She's little, but she's still there. And we had really being successful about involving the community with the hotel. And as you can see, we do different things, and that's what we saw first. We had to bring different activities. They involve the community, but also highlight some of the community assets. Next, please. So we started thinking, and these are some of the first events we start doing with the community. A Christmas bazaar. I think the first Christmas bazaar we had about 6 vendors. The last Christmas bazaar before COVID, we had about 80 vendors. The Halloween party, we started just with my kids and our friends knocking in doors, giving, at the hotel, where we give to our guests candies, and it was fun. And now the last Halloween we had before COVID, I think we had about 300 children around. We started the jamming sessions. They also became very popular. We just invited local artists to come and jam, and the tourism, everybody, the community and the tourism like to be involved in all of this. Next, please. And of course, then we went through Hurricane Ivan. They opened new opportunities for us. It was very traumatic, but thanks to that, a lot of our guests send us money to help for our staff to rebuild their homes. And some of that money, we didn't spend it all, we distributed well, but then we created the staff savings and loan program. They're still going, where staff can save and also borrow money from there at very low rates. And of course, also after Hurricane Ivan, a lot of schools suffered, but it was one that got left behind totally. And my husband Ross went there one day to teach tourism to the kids and realized that he had to teach them to start reading. So we again went to our community and to our guests and managed to raise $180,000 to rebuild the school. We also are involved with the Queen Elizabeth Home. We invite the kids every year to come. We got involved with the Granada Community Library. They're still going. It's been tough, but it only survives by donations. And also our guests are a big part of it. We had just a wonderful guest, Ted, that he donated $30,000 to the community, and $10,000 of those US went to the library. I just took him one day for a visit, and he just fell in love with the place. Back for purpose, we have some people that are champions. The guy you can see here and his wife, every year they send us barrels full of supplies for the kids, and they are not the only ones. A lot of other people bring supplies, and we give them to the Bentham School or to the library. Next, please. I think one of our biggest success has been the Granada Chocolate Festival. I'm from Mexico, and I think I had chocolate running in my blood. And when I came to Granada and realized the quality of our cocoa and chocolate and the effort of somebody to create a bar in Granada wasn't a story that had to be told. So this festival now next year is going to celebrate the 10th year and involves the community, the tourists, and of course the farmers, and has created, we started with 2 chocolate companies. Now we have 7 chocolate companies in the island, and many products they have come as a result of putting more attention just to the production of cocoa. We have a lot of beauty products, and it's been a challenge. And even with COVID, we did it all online. And finding funding for this, it has become more and more challenging, but it's still going. And we managed to do it just with a little bit of money we get donated and the will of the population, really. Street food has been another of successes. It's a event that we do every Wednesday at the hotel, and we invited vendors, food vendors from outside to come and sell their products. And of course, we check all their health credentials, but this has become the thing you had to do when you come to Granada. You had to come to Street Food Wednesday, have some of the food around, oil dance, some of the other local dishes, and mingle with the locals and listen to Grenadian music. Cleanups is something that we started from the very beginning, and we always involve our guests too in the community. We just did one last Saturday, and my daughters organized it, and it was a great success, and we keep our area clean and tidy. Next, please. And so next, yeah. So it's been also, my husband has been amazing at lobbying the government, and that has been something that we had done from the moment we arrived. You can see here some of the things that we've been doing. He was an arch enemy of the electricity company, I think, because always criticize them for the high cost and for letting people use solar energy. Now we have moved into other things, but we also are involved in trying to lobbying the government to low taxes and importing electrical vehicles, solar panels, and we are involved also with the water conservation project that GIZ and GCREW has. When it comes to the environment, we all great believers, the whole family, and we really, really try to do our best to keep our planet better, try to make people more conscious of what's happening in schools and our community and with our tourists too. In the hotel, we have signs that explain them about how can we conserve energy, water, all those things. So we are also very, very vocal about all of this. Next, please. During COVID, we had, all of us had the greatest of our challenges, but we survived and we managed to keep most of our staff and we never closed. So we offer accommodation to first responders. We provided quarantine rooms to the first visitors to the island with people that were infected. We just really trained ourselves to be careful, and we were very successful in doing that. And we also have some of the visiting doctors and created some new events. My daughter Marie managed to have a balcony concert where the band was in one end of the pool and the guests were all in their balconies, and we still can have some entertainment for the people that were with us. Next, please.
Magdalena, you need to wrap up. I know you just have a couple more things to point out. So 1 more minute, please.
Yes, thank you. So our community cleanups are here. We have a green team in the company. Every department has to have a member, and we have monthly meetings where we try to address problems that we have in the hotel and the community when it comes to environmental issues. Next, please. And here is my family. We all work here, and we all try our best to involve the community because we think it's the only way to go. And people, tourists visiting, love that. Our hotel has really become the people's hotel, and we all try our best to showcase the best of Granada and the best of our hotel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madalena. I think that giving back to the community is definitely part of the True Blue Resort DNA. And I know that I have certainly had the benefit of experiencing that Street Food Wednesday. And it's really a fantastic event involving the local community. It's interesting to hear the substantial contributions that your guests have contributed and continue to contribute. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
We'll now move, shifting gears just a little bit to our third panelist and move into more onto the technology side and digital platforms. It's my pleasure to invite to present to us this morning, Mr. Brian Fontaine. He is the director and founder of Disruptive Interventions Limited, and he's a metaverse lead strategist with VR Park, and he's also a community-based tourism specialist consultant with the CTO. So Brian, over to you. You have 10 minutes, and I just remind everybody to put your questions in the Q&A box. Brian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, everyone, and happy World Tourism Day. I'm going to make a very bold attempt to go through with some degree of speed a pretty interesting presentation on the digital economy. And part of the format of this presentation will cover trends in 2022, the evolution of the World Wide Web. We'll do a little bit of that. Some developments in Web3 and Metaverse. Perhaps I want to build a case for exploration of Metaverse technology for tourism purposes, some adoption challenges that we have noticed, and some steps to consider in the Metaverse for business use in tourism. So what are some trends that are occurring? And this is July 2022 highlights. We see that as our population globally approaches 8 billion persons, we see that internet usage and social media usage have, or at least in the case of internet, surpassed 60% of the global population at 5 billion persons and users online, and social media at 4.7 billion. But it's also good to take a look at this growth trend. And some of us might believe that it might have been recent, but over the past year, 10 years, 2012 to 2022, there's been a 127% increase in internet users. And it really shows how digitized and digitalized the global populations have grown. And our engagement in tourism is especially important, because the next slide I want to show is really where the challenge lies. In the case that the Caribbean still lags our main source markets, Europe and North America, in terms of internet adoption. And this speaks both across personal as well as business use cases. So there is a dichotomy there where our source markets are searching, looking, and trending along these internet adoption pathways, but the Caribbean itself has to grow in that area. Social media use, another key component, has grown by over 212% in the last 10 years, moving from 1.4 billion users to over 4.6 billion in 2022. And again, we see that issue within the Caribbean context, where only 55% of our population are active social media users, as well as the whole notion that our businesses are largely offline and are continuing to miss out on these opportunities and businesses. Let me sort of set the frame that what we just looked at was the evolution of Web 1 and Web 2. So Web 1 have been the origination of when internet really kind of came into mainstream consumer use. And if you remember those early days, the conversation was really about connecting people with information. Very static websites, almost like information directories, and we would search and have so much of information that related to how to call, maybe some directions, maybe a photo or two, but there was a need to continue the conversation offline through traditional means. And that's really the Web 1 era. And then Web 2 happened along the continuum of social media. So around 2004 to 8, you saw an advent of technologies such as Facebook, etc., that moved away from just information to also connecting people. So the whole notion of social interaction and the term, of course, dubbed social media really is Web 2 and the evolution of the internet at that point. But over the last 3 to 4 years, there's been an active conversation on Web 3. And it's really coming forward as the new frontier of where internet technologies are going to go. And there are three sort of components on which Web 3 conversations are built. One, it's going to be framed within blockchain technology. The emphasis is going to be on decentralization and individual ownership of data. And of course, there are different versions or visions of what the future of the internet can look like. So just a quick definition on Web3, decentralized internet, and that's really where we're going, built on distributed technologies such as blockchain and decentralized autonomous organizations, rather than centralized servers. Think about Facebook, Instagram, Google, and really owned by individuals and corporations. It's almost like a democratization of the internet. And just a quick definition also on blockchain, this presentation will be made afterwards. Really, blockchains are shared databases that link data in blocks that are not editable, and therefore it really creates a trust in terms of transaction flow and activity and how your data is managed. So in a Web3 world, you will have, as a user, more control over your data and ownership, and therefore you will have to learn direct access and transference via blockchain. And in comes the notion of metaverse, and I really want to raise that context of, we see the Caribbean lagging behind some of the Web 1 and Web 2 components, right? So you have a low adoption rate you're seeing within the context, we see it in our community-based tourism projects, that a lot of businesses are not even digitally present. And we're trying to get them on board with the notion of websites, Google My Business presence, social media pages, etc. Yet the world is shifting into Web 3. And that means our source markets are also shifting in how they want to communicate with businesses and providers of tourism experiences, more particularly in favorite and popular destinations such as the Caribbean. But what is the metaverse within the context of Web 3? And it's really going to be the successor state of today's computing and networking paradigms. It's really massively scaled, interoperable, real-time networks of three-dimensional worlds and parks. So at its basic state now, you have a sense of immersion, real-time activity, and user or avatar agency. So they're fully embodying who they are in these avatars. And in the future context, you're going to be able to link these worlds, digital worlds and virtual reality worlds within and across platforms and devices. You'll be able to have concurrency with thousands of persons interacting simultaneously. And of course, there are many use cases spanning beyond human activity. It will be the way in which we experience the internet in the future, and enabled through many technologies such as VR and augmented reality, where physical aspects of the world interact with goggles, lenses, and devices so that you can navigate within the physical and virtual world at the same time. I also just want to quickly define that there are three sort of spectrum elements of what metaverse can look like. In a traditional sense, we have ones that are non-blockchain connected, and therefore they are still controlled to some extent within corporations, user data are protected, etc. And you don't have that element yet of blockchain and also decentralization, where you can purchase real estate and build your own worlds. And it really is almost a risk profile from the lowest risk and almost easy to access version at traditional centralized, all the way to a higher sense of risk where you have to really gamble on understanding all the components of the metaverse technologies. Just a quick example, at VR Park, one of the entities I'm with is one of those centralized traditional metaverses. And just, when you get the presentation, understand that there are also layers of the metaverse, moving from enablers, infrastructure, and platforms. But critically to the top, you also have that whole notion of content and experiences. And this is where I think the tourism opportunity lies, which is on the top of the infrastructure. What do people want to interact with? And just a quick example on data set from McKinsey about the sectors that are leading the adoption and are planning to dedicate their budgets towards metaverse over the next 3 to 5 years. you see that tourism, whilst it's not yet huge in terms of percentage of firms that are going to commit capital, we see the percentage of capitals is near the leading sort of industries such as energy, high-tech, and automotive. Media and entertainment is almost on the same path, which is 15% of digital budgets are being allocated to develop metaverse and invest into the learning of this new emerging technology. So it's something to pay attention to within the Caribbean context. Also, what's driving it is the consumer's response to metaverse and VR technology. And we see that over 60% of consumers are excited about the transition to move from everyday activities into virtual reality spaces. And some of the reasons to the left here include connecting with persons, exploring digital worlds, meeting and collaborating, and purchasing and trading of NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. We'll talk about that in a sec. And also initiatives implemented to date by industry. And this was a poll done by McKinsey with senior execs. And just take a look at tourism, transport, and logistics. Two of the highest sort of use cases so far that have been done in the tourism and transport industry spoke to learning and development of employees, as well as events and conferences. There are quite a number of other sort of mid-tier sort of uses, but I wanted to highlight these two by some quick examples, specifically dealing with learning and then events and conferences. Let's talk a bit about the opportunities for hospitality skills and development. There was a PwC soft skills training efficacy study done in 2020, actually 2 years ago, that spoke about the comparison between three modalities of learning, which move from classroom time into the conversation about VR and, e-learning, which would be your typical Zoom, learning management systems, and of course your VR. And it was discovered that there's employees learn up to 4 times faster within VR-related environments. It's V-learning. There actually was improvement and confidence in how they were applying what they were taught, particularly and acting on issues such as diversity and inclusion. You see a higher level of discussion and acting on issues. There was more emotional connection to the content, almost 20 times, 4 or 5 times the classroom and e-learning environments. And of course, viewers were more focused, less times to be distracted. You saw how this is actually moving down to under 1 minute in terms of the percentage of lower distraction rates. And of course, VR learning can be more cost effective at scale. So very interesting data that's leading us to have the conversation on what does digital learning look like. And this was just a quick sort of mock-up of the Caribbean Tourism Institute, content rich, content specific. This avatar of myself in a classroom actually has its own PC that can pursue the content that's developed, but within a real classroom environment with facilitated learning, etc. So it's a reality that's present. So I'm going to quickly show also a clip that we did. VR Park executed a conference, an exposition hall for IDB Trinidad in August. So this is just an example of some of the applications for a MICE or related conference type activity that would have an exhibition hall component. So this is just a quick flyby. And this is the smallest version of it, highly customizable. Each booth can be manned with individuals in real time. Very, very, very interesting technology of what the future of expos, farm trips, and marketplaces can look like. Great. Just a
Brian,
hi.
you have another minute, so
We'll do it, no problem.
Yeah.
Yep. And just a few use cases to think about and consider, the rising cost of transport, the impact on that with familiar farm tours and your MICE and business tourism. People are also considering carbon footprint reductions, the conversation about digital souvenirs, and of course, the emergence of how to market directly to avatars and persons who prefer that there has a dichotomy between themselves in reality and themselves as an avatar. How do you create personalized experience beyond the in-destination visit? Preservation of culture and NFTs, or using NFTs particularly for community-based tourism projects, and leveraging existing content in a more powerful, facilitated, immersive manner. Mind the gap. We always know that there's a bell curve, so there's always the early market where we are now, and of course the pragmatist early majority or the target markets we're going after next. And that's really where the opportunity lies for the Caribbean. And in terms of getting started, very summary slide. Never approach this conversation based on novelty, but develop a value-based focused strategy, test, learn, and adopt, and prepare to scale. The information is there when you get your presentation, and perhaps the digital future of tourism may already be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was certainly a lot to take in. We thank you for your contribution this morning. I'm sure that there will be a lot of follow-up questions. And, you know, as Brian tried to pack in everything into a very short space of time, very interesting in terms of the digital economy and what's new. Our fourth and final speaker is Mrs. Haley Jo Carr, and she's the training director and coordinator of the Reef Rescue Network for the Perry Institute for Marine Science. She has been she is the coordinator for over 40 coral restoration projects, but this morning she will be speaking to us on a project in the Bahamas, the Bahamas Sea Coral Cluster Project. So Haley, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you and happy World Tourism Day, everyone. And thank you for the talks so far. It's been extremely interesting. So a different talk altogether. My name is Haley and I'm the coordinator of the Reef Rescue Network and currently the lead on the Bahamas Sea Coral Cluster Project. And that is being funded by the Inter-American Development Bank and the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility. And this initiative is focused on scaling up coral restoration activities here in the Bahamas. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with coral restoration, coral restoration, what that involves is we can actually grow critically endangered corals, both in land and offshore nurseries. And there's an image of one of our offshore nurseries growing some aquaporid corals. And these nurseries are established, they're continually monitored using scientific guidelines. However, it's not just scientists that are involved with this project. It's really exciting that recreational divers and the tourism industry is now becoming involved with these activities. And recreational divers can actually assist in the maintenance of these nurseries and also help to outplant these corals back onto the reefs. Assisting in restoring these coral reef ecosystems obviously provides essential ecosystem services to society, including what we're talking about today, which is recreation and tourism. I'm just going to show you a little video more about the project.
The Bahamas is home to 35% of the Caribbean's coral reefs, making it one of the most sought-after dive destinations in the world. Sadly, threats like climate change are killing our reefs, with scientists predicting many will be gone by 2050. But we haven't lost hope. An exciting restoration technique called coral farming could give them a fighting chance. The process is simple. We first collect fragments from healthy corals and grow them in nurseries where they're cared for in optimal conditions. Once they're big enough, we prune the corals and outplant their progeny onto struggling reefs. Coral farming can be taught to amateur and expert divers alike, and each 5-centimeter piece can produce over 25 big fragments in just 4 years. Working side by side, scientists and recreational divers could grow tens of thousands of corals to replenish degraded reefs. That's why our vision is to create a community of coral farmers across the Bahamas, fostering better diving experiences, a growing reef restoration tourism sector, and above all, healthier coral reefs. The Bahamas is home to...
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a great overview of the project. And what the missions are and the objectives, if you like, of the Sea Coral Project is to engage those recreational divers in coral restoration and conservation, boosting the country's dive tourism sector and developing new nationwide revenue streams as a result. The cluster includes several businesses across the Bahamian Islands, predominantly within the scuba diving industry, and the focus is to scale up coral restoration that has already been piloted and shown to be successful through the current Reef Rescue Network. Numerous agencies support these businesses and are working collaboratively to foster ocean resilience and enhance the tourism industry. Current funding will include building capacity through unique training and education opportunities in ocean conservation and scuba diving instructor training with a focus on women and young people. We're planning to build and expand on the current nurseries to increase the numbers of corals grown and outplanted back onto reefs, greatly benefiting not only coral structure, but the myriad of marine species that live within coral reef ecosystems. The project aims to raise awareness and increase participation within local communities, to educate on threats to their ocean environment, and to engage them in sustainable practices to assist in protection, restoration, and the income generating practices. Marketing and promotion are a key step to let the world know that the Bahamas is the place to come for coral restoration and marine conservation activities. And our pilot models have shown businesses are receiving profits from these activities. So it's really now time to expand this into the global market more effectively. The economy in the Bahamas is almost entirely dependent on tourists and tourism. And it contributes to 2/3 of all jobs and well over half of the money with which the government provides public services. And the Sea Coral Project is aiming to tap into this award-winning tourism market. In 2014, dive packages alone contributed 340 million annually to the Bahamian economy, or roughly 3% of the Bahamian GDP. And divers also spend 60 to 80% more than the average tourist. The Bahamas is also among the top dive destinations in the Caribbean, and this was recognized by the 2021 Reader's Choice Award for snorkeling, wool, and wreck diving. And our aim now is to really get that award now for marine conservation and coral restoration activities. So a little bit more detail about the actual product. So Coral Restoration is offering a new dive experience, allowing scuba divers to actively get involved during their vacation to help maintain a coral nursery, and they can even get to plant a coral as well themselves. And as you can imagine, this is an extremely rewarding experience for divers, and many plan return trips back to see how their corals have grown. The product itself, it can take various forms. We have one-day certification programs, we have snorkeling programs for people that don't dive, and we also have week-long marine conservation programs for people that are really interested in making an impact while they're here. So there's lots of different programs so we can cater to a wide market, and it allows each dive resort and dive shop that's involved in this cluster to be able to create their own unique packages. Economically speaking, the Sea Coral Cluster aims to increase sales for local businesses. We want to also increase the number of core businesses involved and support new businesses, especially those owned by women, and increase job opportunities. Economic recovery for the tourism sector is requiring new approaches to diversify revenue streams and identify ways to build resilience in the industry by conserving and restoring coral reefs. Restoring these treasured marine environments is at the heart of this tourist experience. And that's why the Bahamas Sea Coral Project is determined to increase the number of coral fragments grown and propagated back onto coral reefs in the most sustainable way possible. What we want to do is feed two birds with one seed. Not only will we save critically endangered corals and restore the environment divers love to explore, but we're also ensuring that the dive tourism sector remains sustainable and intact for future generations. Tourists visiting the Bahamas can have a positive impact, helping to restore coral reef ecosystems and support human health and well-being for all of us. All stakeholders in the tourism industry have a shared responsibility to not only preserve, yet restore a country's natural assets, whether that be a coral reef, a rainforest, or a desert. The Bahamas Sea Coral Initiative provides an example to others of unifying locals and visitors by merging our seas and coral reef ecosystems with the drive for marine adventure, the desire to protect our ocean, and the realization that we are all in this together to sustain our businesses, community, and culture, and really start to rethink tourism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Haley. That was definitely an interesting project, and the that combination of the restoration of the coral reefs, and as well as the economic impact that it brings, and one supporting the other is a really interesting concept. We don't have a lot of time, but we do have a couple of questions. So I'm going to just maybe throw out two of those questions, and then I'm just going to ask all of the panelists to give some final thoughts. So the first question is, and it's a bit of a lengthy one, but you know, bear with me. To what extent does it make sense to incentivize adoption of sustainable solutions by operators? Example, lowering taxes, banking fees, insurance premiums, etc. That is the relief at point of operation, minimizing OpEx, instead of pursuing a share of taxes collected at the point of tourism industry. I will throw out the question, and maybe we can have Carol take a first stab at it. Carol, are you with us?
I am. I'm trying to undo my camera, but I can't.
That's
our sense is, and it's worked for us in Jamaica. The taxes in the sector are very high. They continue to be so. The desire to the effectiveness of the TEF in collecting that duty at the source, at the point of entry, has also worked for us. So it really depends on the point of view of the government, the people making decisions. I think both have value. It really depends on your system and the thinking of your leadership.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol. Brian, the next question is for you. Will Web 3.0 be big data real-time information?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the Web3's future reality as almost portable blockchain information, where we will get to exchange data with parties we choose to interact with. And think about it in the context of when you currently try to do banking within the Caribbean. Every single time you open an account, you have to present all of this information over and over and over and over again. The future context is that you walk with your data digitally, and you are the owner of it that can choose how it is applied. And of course, this will go further into even how we do our bookings and how hotels and maybe destinations manage entry data. I mean, the world will then be one where individual ownership of data is now exchanged on platforms where there really is both a transparency and an accuracy. So trust in the data, so there's no manipulation of it via blockchain, but that there's ownership of it. So it's almost like big data moving into democratized data. So yes, the collection of users within Web3 make up the big data landscape, but the interaction and exchange of data now becomes one that's more personalized. And I think organizations who keep thinking about information and data as a capture strategy will realize they have to adapt and adopt more interactive, embracive, and more democratized solutions.
Thank you, Brian. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask everybody to wrap up now because we have run out of time. I'm going to start, Magdalena, with you first. Your final thoughts.
Thank you very much. Well, I think my final thoughts are: if you are looking into have more social responsibility in your business and interact with your tourists, just look at what is good around you, what great things are around your community, and highlight them. And you don't need a huge budget. People are always welcome to participate and to cooperate with some of the events that you're probably gonna be looking at it. And I had a couple great, just like I say, one of my friends told me the other day, your hotel is the people's hotel. And that was a great compliment. And another friend told me too, Magdalena, when everybody's planning, you and Ross and your family are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, your final thoughts, please.
All of the things we're talking about here today, the initial conversation about carbon capture and the kind of development we're talking about here, all of this takes money and a lot of creative energy and a lot of innovation. We are all of us challenged with finding those resources. And all of us have to find ways of finding the resources, finding the money, finding the innovation, finding the human capital to lead and guide these things. And all of us in the Caribbean have a long road to hoe. It's not going to be simple, but we have to do it because this is our moment. This is what is required.
And we're committed, which is important. Haley, your final thoughts?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think just everyone just to start to think, like we're saying, rethinking tourism and starting to think about planet and people, and, you know, also thinking about the different creative ways that we can do that. So start to, you know, like be creative, like the coral restoration project that we have here. And for each one of us to really think about, you know, ourselves and what we do when we go on vacation is even just a starting point, just to think about what you do. And then as well as starting to create ideas of what others can do to participate is really important. And a lot of people have been asking questions, so you're welcome to look at our work on the Perry Institute for Marine Science website if you want to learn more about the Coral Restoration Initiative, or contact me if you're maybe a resort or a dive shop watching this and you want to get involved with coral restoration. Then just be happy for you to reach out to me. I've put my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. And Brian, you have the final word.
Thanks, Maria. And I really want to make the clarion call that the Caribbean is living within an increasing digital divide. I think without a doubt, we do need to accelerate and put that conversation on the front burner, not just as institutions and not just as destinations. Our source markets are becoming rapidly more sophisticated in how they adopt technology for payments, how they do research on our destinations, and how they want to interact with us. And we can't put up the resistance that it's the Caribbean, let's just take it easy. We'll find increasingly that we're unable to find the audience that we did 5 to 7 years ago because they're living and working and existing in other spaces. So I really want to challenge all our destination planners to really consider the fact that we have a future that's barreling towards us, as opposed to us going towards this future, and we have to stand ready to do and respond to it with the technology, with the investments that's required, but also with the right mindset to what our users and future guests would like to experience at the Caribbean level. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for putting forward all of these ideas and experiences and knowledge on innovative tourism financing and investment solutions. I believe that we have a lot of information that was presented in a very short space of time. Hopefully the presentations will be shared with everybody and will engender some further discussion among yourselves. So thank you very much for joining us for the second panel, and Chair, back to you.
Right. Thank you very much to Wayne and Maria for the rich discussion that we had this morning. I think that we are certainly better off for it. We have certainly increased our awareness of some of the initiatives that are taking place around the region. And if I were to take away one thing from this session and one word that I'm hearing coming out is the need for collaboration. In the first panel session, I heard the cry that even if we have to engage with the carbon markets, we cannot do it alone. There has to be collaboration. I heard Carol again cry out in the second session. It's all of us. She kept saying it over and over. It's all of us involved in how do we raise this financing that is needed? How do we engage communities? You hear it again in terms of from Brian's presentation, that there has to be a collaborative effort if it is that we have to certainly engage with technology and ensure that stakeholders are taking advantage of their web presence. So colleagues, thank you very much for giving us of your time this morning and allowing our expert panelists to share their experiences with us. At this time, I want to hand over to Ms. Faye Gill, who is the Director of Membership Services at the CTO, who will deliver some brief closing remarks for us. So I will hand the podium over to Faye.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, yes, still morning. Good morning. Happy World Tourism Day to all of our panelists and to our attendees. It is an honor to deliver the closing remarks for this Caribbean World Tourism Day virtual forum for 2022. It's always wonderful when the regional tourism sector can come together and exchange ideas and deliberate issues of mutual concern. This year, the theme, Rethinking Tourism, Financing for Sustainable Tourism Development, the Caribbean Tourism Organization and its convenient partners has sought to bring attention to new opportunities, innovative models, and approaches to funding the sustainable development of Caribbean tourism. As a region that is highly dependent on tourism, these issues are timely considering the recent COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on the regional tourism industry. This, coupled with concerns over the impacts of climate, such as a more active hurricane season, speaks to the importance of resource mobilization and building resilience, which has become imperatives for the region. This forum brought together practicing professionals from the public sector, private sector, academia, and regional and international development partners to share perspectives, best practices, and insights on alternative approaches to sustainable tourism financing, and various strategies to rethink and seek to enhance the sustainability and competitiveness of Caribbean tourism. The first panel discussed climate financing, including carbon credit, carbon offset schemes, which allow individuals and companies to invest in environmental projects around the world in order to balance their own footprints. These initiatives might involve rolling out clean energy technologies or purchasing carbon credits from emissions trading schemes. Other schemes work by capturing CO2 emissions directly from the air through the planting of trees. Panelists demonstrated tangible projects and initiatives related to resource mobilization. Many governments, multilateral institutions, and businesses are not yet factoring climate risk into their decisions, and many vulnerable countries in the region lack the capacity to make these investments. Climate risk and adaptation solutions should be built into all investment, budgeting, and policy decisions. Equally important is the need for the private sector to work with government and other private sector entities to develop new tools and capacities to integrate climate risks at every stage of tourism planning and development. Our second panel explored innovative tourism financing and investment solutions, including travelers' philanthropy, tourism enhancement funds, and opportunities linked to conservation and the digital economy. The future of tourism, as we have seen, is to foster good global citizenship, where travelers enjoy learning and positively contributing to worthwhile community and conservation projects in tourism destinations. Through this relatively new and growing form of philanthropy, funds, supplies, services, and expertise can flow from the travel industry and travelers into host communities. The philanthropy of these travelers can generate substantial resources for communities in cash and kind through both tourism businesses and visitors making concrete contributions of time, talent, and treasure to local projects beyond which is generated through the normal tourism business. Similarly, tourism enhancement programs and digital technologies hold immense potential to provide funding for the sustainable enhancement of the tourism product. As this forum now closes, it is our hope that presentations and today's discourse will stimulate ideas and inspire action in the countries, communities, and businesses across the region as we collectively seek to find solutions to the many challenges that threaten the future of Caribbean tourism. Thank you for joining us, and happy World Tourism Day.
Thank you very much, Faye, for that succinct yet comprehensive review of what transpired this morning. And colleagues, as we bring this forum to a close, please join me in welcoming our tourism sustainability champion, Amanda Charles, Sustainable Tourism Product Development Specialist at the CTO. Amanda?
Thank you very much, Dr. Cameron. Happy World Tourism Day to our virtual audience. And I have the distinct honor of delivering the thank you or the vote of thanks to our various speakers, panelists, presenters, and of course to you, our audience who has stayed with us and who joined us to celebrate Caribbean World, well, the Caribbean celebration of World Tourism Day. So to begin, I would like to convey my sincerest thanks to Dr. Akola Cameron, the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. She served as our chairperson today, and I think she did so excellently. Thank you to the University of the West Indies for always responding to the call to collaborate with the CTO to support knowledge exchanges and ultimately the sustainable development of Caribbean tourism. A special thanks also to Mr. Neil Walters, the acting CEO and Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. And Neil very expertly led the organizing of this event and supported as well our outreach to the various presenters. So I would like to thank Neil for his continued astute leadership and support as it relates to the work of the Sustainable Tourism Division and in directing the affairs of the CTO. I would like to now thank our panelists, our esteemed moderator, Mr. Wayne Elliott, one of our strongest partners as it relates to community-based tourism development, that is the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility, and Wayne in his role as coordinator for innovation and productivity has been collaborating with the CTO on a number of projects. And I really thank him for responding to the call to moderate a panel on climate financing, which he indicated was not his area of expertise, but I think he proved even himself wrong today by his expert handling of the panel. And the various presenters, Mr. Patrick Munyaneza, the Global Carbon Market Project Technical Advisor at the German Agency for International Development Cooperation. Thank you very much. Thanks also for facilitating an introduction to the two of the other speakers that we did not have a previous relationship with, and we look forward to future collaboration opportunities. Mr. Gary Klein, CEO of Carbon Asset Developer Associates Grenada, thank you for sharing your depth of knowledge on carbon market opportunities and carbon credit schemes for the tourism sector. Ms. Alejandra Blanco, Director of Environmental Services, Mexico 2, thank you for sharing the best practice and the example of the various initiatives ongoing in Mexico. Thanks also for your insights as it relates to an approach to carbon mitigation and adaptation for the tourism sector. And lastly, rounding off this panel was Ms. Angela Burnett-Penn, Climate Change Officer at the Government of the British Virgin Islands. And we have recognized the effort of the BVI in pioneering a climate change trust fund as original best practice, and it is something that we would hope to see replicated across the countries of the region. Moving now to our second panel on innovative tourism financing and investment solutions. A very special thank you is extended to Ms. Maria Fowler, Senior Technical Specialist for Tourism at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission. And again, Maria, in her role, and by extension, the OECS is a close partner. The member states of the OECS are members of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and Maria is always very willing to collaborate, and I look forward to strengthening our relationship. Mrs. Carol Rose Brown, Director for the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation. The Jamaica Tourism Enhancement Fund is the oldest in the region. It is the most successful and certainly a best practice that we would like to see the regional tourism sector consider as it relates to funding tourism development. From the hotelier or private sector perspective, Mrs. Magdalena Filden, owner of the True Blue Bay Resort in Grenada. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your passion for Grenada and for the community where your resort is housed. It was very interesting to learn about both your approach to corporate social responsibility and community engagement. And that would be tied in the context of travelers, philanthropy, and how you get your guests to support community development efforts. Special thanks also to Mr. Brian Frontin, who provided a wealth of information on the digital economy. And he was tasked to merge two concepts, the metaverse and opportunities related to virtual reality, augmented reality, Web 3.0, as we now know. And also though, where do we stand as a region in terms of technology adoption? And I think he did an excellent job. And I also think that we need one session just to dive deeply into the opportunities that the digital economy holds for the sector. And finally, Mrs. Haley Jo Carr, Training Director at the Perry Institute for Marine Science. Thank you for sharing on the Bahamas Sea Coral Cluster Project. We think it was a great example of tourism and conservation, but also in terms of producing sustainable alternative livelihoods for persons living in the community and being an example of an experiential tourism product that visitors can engage in. I would also like to thank at this time Ms. Faye Gill, CTO's Director for Memberships, for gracing us with her presence and providing a summary of the outcomes. And lastly, I would like to extend my appreciation and thanks to you, our virtual audience, representatives from the various ministries of tourism, the tourism authorities, from private sector entities, the Hotel and Tourism Association, of course, from the various tourism, academic, and tertiary institutions, our regional and international partners, delegates all, thank you for joining us to really bring visibility to this sector as we seek to sustain tourism as an economic driver for the longer term. And of course, we look forward to you joining us again next year, and stay tuned for the various activities or events that the CTO will be hosting this year. And we will, of course, continue to disseminate information through our Sustainable Tourism Roundup. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful day and happy World Tourism Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I do. Did I forget Sharon Coward? I did. So sincerest apologies, but I really should not forget the team who worked in the background to provide invaluable support, without which this day would not be as successful. Sharon Coward, CTO's IT administrator, I mean, sends emails at 10 at night, is always working so diligently behind the scenes, managing everything related to information technology to ensure, our events such as this are a success. So thank you very much, Sharon Coward. Thanks also to Tanisha Brown from the University of the West Indies, really my partner in conceptualizing and delivering this event. I want to note the contribution of Miss Siobhan Johnson at Compete Caribbean and other colleagues at the CTO, including Suzette Kelman and Marvell Seeley and Sharon Trotman, who really supported the convening of this event. To the partners who, in terms of outreaching and always agreeing to collaborate and lend their expertise, the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility, and the University of the West Indies. I say thank you, and I look forward to collaborating with you again next year. Over to you, Dr. Cameron.
Colleagues, please join me in thanking Amanda Charles for just her passion, her drive, her commitment to sustainable tourism development in the Caribbean. Amanda has been the driving force behind this initiative, and we thank her for all the hard work that she is doing behind the scenes and for moving us forward. And so, colleagues, let me take this opportunity to wish you a good rest of day as we continue to reflect, rethink, and of course, re-engineer the way that we approach tourism in the region. So, colleagues, again, happy World Tourism Day. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Goodbye, Chairman. Thank you.